Welcome back everyone to the video, and today we're doing something pretty interesting that I haven't really done before. I'm actually going to react to a compilation in the NFL Throwback account on YouTube put together, basically going over every NFL team's Mount Rushmore. If you don't really know what that means, you haven't seen it before, it's just a way of kind of sorting, the best of the best in whatever category you're doing. You can do it for, really anything. As far as NFL teams, though, a Mount Rushmore of the, Bengals would be like all of the the top four best players from Bengals history. So if there's any current players that line up with that, all the way back to the entire history of the team. The NFL basically did one for every single team in the NFL. I've only seen like 2 or 3, so I'm going in pretty blind to this. And I'm not going to show literally the entire video because it's an hour and 42 minutes long, and with me reacting to it, it would probably be well over 2 hours, and let's be real, no one wants to sit and watch a video that long. So I'm going to basically just keep it like the pictures they show of the Mount Rushmore. I'm not going to show the clips of every single player and all this kind of stuff. We're going to try to keep it relatively brief, but we are just going to jump into it right now. So the first team is the 49ers. Now, the 49ers are one of the better franchises in NFL history, at least in my opinion, from the players to their accomplishments. Ronnie Lott, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, and Steve Young are basically the top 4 players from this franchise the NFL chose to highlight for them. To me, I think this is probably it. There's probably a couple other guys you could throw in there. But I don't know if you could really take any of these guys away. I feel like you can only really add as like an honorable mention thing. I think these really are just the best of the 49ers category. So this one I would say they got right. Next is the Colts. So this one is Gino Marchetti, if I said that correctly, Peyton Manning, Johnny Unitas, and Marvin Harrison. This is a pretty interesting one. I feel like you could have went maybe some different directions. Reggie Wayne probably isn't good enough for like Mount Rushmore level, but someone like Edgerrin James, I mean, he's a Hall of Fame running back. I feel you could probably throw him in there, and people probably wouldn't have had a problem with it, at least in my opinion. I know they had a very good defensive lineman I'm going to have to look up after I say this because I can't remember what his name is. I was thinking of Dwight Freeney. I could not think of his name. So I feel like there's probably some other names you maybe could have thrown in here, but I'd say Manning for sure, Marvin Harrison for sure, and I think Johnny Unitas is probably good as well. The Geno guy, no disrespect to him, but I don't know much about him for one, and two, I do feel like, Edgerrin James was a very, very good running back. But again, I understand why maybe it's hard to put running backs in these kind of things too, although he might have been running back as well. Looks like probably maybe a tight end or receiver. I'm honestly not totally sure who he is. I apologize for not knowing a ton about Geno, but on to the Chiefs. Derek Thomas, Tony Gonzalez, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. Yeah, I'm not sure where else you could really go with this one. I think Derek Thomas is a lock, along with Tony G, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce, to be perfectly honest with you. I think at his height, like Jamal Charles, you could have thrown in here, but I don't think the longevity is really there to put him like a Mount Rushmore thing. Maybe not maybe, for sure, probably like the 2010s. But like an all-time thing, I'm not sure any other Chiefs players you really throw in here. But to all of you guys watching this though, if there's any players as we go through this for every single team that you guys were like, man, he really should have been there, comment that down below. Because again, I've seen the Panthers because they're my favorite team, and I've seen, I think, the Vikings, and maybe one more. I think the Ravens for obviously the thumbnail and all. So the rest I haven't actually seen, but I like the Chiefs as well. Next we have the Saints, Ricky Jackson, Drew Brees, Willie Roaf, and Cameron Jordan. I think it's actually really cool they threw Cameron Jordan on here and really gave him his props. For a current player, we've seen Kelce and Mahomes so far. I don't think any other current players have been on here yet. But that's really cool for Cameron Jordan. Drew Brees, I think, is a lock. Ricky Jackson's a lock. I think Willie Roaf's a lock as well. So I'm not sure where else you could really go here with the Saints. I feel like they've always had a pretty good defense, so maybe someone off a really good defense, maybe like that Super Bowl team or something. But in my opinion, I really do think this is pretty much it. Next is the Bills. We have Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Bruce Smith, and O.J. Simpson. Gotta contain myself. Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Bruce Smith again, and of course, OJ too. I really do feel like this is probably the correct thing. I think you can maybe make a case for like Andre Reed. But again, to me, I do think this is pretty solid for the Bills. So Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Bruce Smith, and O.J. Simpson, I think were good choices. Next is the Vikings. This one's pretty interesting. We have Alan Page, Adrian Peterson, Fran Tarkin, and Chris Carter. I think Alan Page is for sure deserving of this, but could you also substitute him for like John Randall? Because in my opinion, I think there's totally a case there. I think Peterson, he has to be there. I think Fran Tarkenton has to be there. Chris Carter, I do think it's deserving of it. Like, could you make a case for Randy Moss as well? Like, I feel like you probably could. But again, these players are all deserving of it. The Vikings have had some pretty standout players, Hall of Famers, honestly, throughout their franchise. So not gonna lie, a little surprised not to see John Randall on here, and I guess Randy Moss too. But otherwise, I do think it's a solid top 4 here for the Vikings. But yeah, let me know down below if you guys think Randy Moss should be on here, because I know he's one a lot of people have talked about. Next is the Steelers. I mean, and you can go a lot of different directions for this team too, kind of like the Vikings. We have Jack Lambert, Terry Bradshaw, Joe Green, and Ben Roethlisberger. I would say, yeah, this is probably it. You could throw in like maybe even Franco Harris. I think Mel Blount could be on here. Antonio Brown, like, he's really one of the better receivers all time. It's unfortunate no one really thinks of that anymore. But, I don't think AB is deserving over anybody here. But I do think that, like, as an honorable mention, I think absolutely, he could be an honorable mention for the Steelers, Mount Rushmore. But yeah, so, Mel Blount, I think you could have thrown on here. And I can't remember the other person I just said too. Franco Harris. I think there's another Steelers running back I'm forgetting too that was also kind of like a tank like that. But yeah, otherwise, Steelers, really good franchise. One of the better ones in the entire NFL. Steel curtain defense. They've had very good offenses throughout the years too. So a lot of different options here. I think this is a very solid top 4 though. I don't think they got anything wrong necessarily, but I do think you could have went other directions with it. Next is the Seahawks. So we have Walter Jones, Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner, and Steve Largent. This is a really cool top 4. I like how there's like some more current players, but then also like some much older players like Steve Largent on there. And also, I like this top 4. Could you have gone somewhere else? I mean, like, probably like Richard Sherman from like that Legion of Boom, or Ham Chancellor, or Earl Jones. Why does his name sound weird? I guess Earl Thomas, not Earl Jones. I'm not sure who Earl Jones is. But Earl Thomas could be on there. I think, that steel curtain-wise, is that Mount Rushmore worthy? Probably not. But those are still like some more standout players in the Seahawks history. Sean Alexander is one that, like, I feel like you could probably make a case for him being on here. He's not, obviously, but I think, he could have been on the Mount Rushmore type of thing. So a lot of different guys that you can maybe substitute on there or have like an honorable mention, but for a top 4, this one's pretty solid. Next is the Browns. We have Otto Graham, Lou Groza, Jim Brown, and Joe Thomas. I think, Jim Brown's probably the biggest lock on here for the Browns for sure. And I think elsewhere, they got this pretty solid too. I don't know a ton about Lou Groza, to be honest with you, but looking at the Browns as a franchise, I don't feel like there's any people that like you gotta throw on there or anything instead of him. So yeah, honestly, I think they kind of nailed it. No offense, Browns fans, there aren't a lot of super iconic Browns players throughout NFL history. And the ones that there are, I think they definitely nailed on this one. Next is the Giants. So we got Emlyn Tunnel, Lawrence Taylor, Michael Strahan, and Mel Hine, if I said that correctly. I guess it's one of those, I guess. Probably the biggest, most kind of glaring guy off here is Eli Manning. In my opinion, I would put him on here just because, and again, no disrespect to like Mel Hine or Mel Hine or whatever, but like, Manning had 2 Super Bowl wins, pretty big Super Bowl wins that he won against like, Tom Brady. So it was like he was playing against light competition. Not trying to disrespect, some of the older legends of the game either, but I think there's absolutely a case for Eli Manning being on here. I think they do have honorable mentions on here. I'm not going to look at those. I don't want to like sway my opinion. I want it to be kind of like just how I'm reacting to it. You know what I mean? So I would hope they have Eli Manning as an honorable mention. But other than that, yeah, I mean, they nailed with Lawrence Taylor, one of the best defensive players of all time. Michael Strahan, again, one of the best defensive linemen of all time. So I think they did do this, pretty solid. If we do it like 2010s and, you had like Eli Manning on there and Odell on there, you could probably have even like maybe Victor Cruz on there for the 2010s, but all time speaking, this is pretty good. Next, we have the Texans. So we have Dwayne Brown, J.J. Watt, Andre Johnson, and DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know about you guys, but to me, it just feels like another like lifetime when Hopkins is actually on the Texans. It's like so much time has passed since. I mean, I guess it has, but it's just weird. Like, just to go back and look at him on the Texans. I mean, he was, one of the best in the league. Goes to the Cardinals and then now, obviously Titans. But anyway, yeah, really good top 4 for the Texans here. I'm not sure where else they could have taken this, to be honest. The Texans are a relatively new NFL franchise. So, they've never really had like a standout quarterback. I think their passing leader for the franchise is Matt Schaub, if I'm not mistaken there. I'm pretty sure it's him. But regardless, I think, you get J.J. Watt on there, first ballot Hall of Famer. Hopkins on there, Johnson on there. I'm not sure where else you'd really go with this one, to be honest with you. Next, we have the Bears with Sid Luckman, Walter Payton, Mike Singletary, and Dick Butkus. I think Walter Payton, Mike Singletary, and Dick Butkus, locks for this. I can't say I know a whole lot about Mr. Sid Luckman, but obviously, to be on here, he's somewhat of a notable player, even though he played, a very long time ago, where I'm not familiar with a ton of people. But I do feel like, William Perry, I would think, a case to be on here. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe he's not quite Mount Rushmore level, but I kind of always assumed he was. But regardless, I mean, they got the big names on here for sure. Like, there's no possible way you could leave off Peyton, Singletary, or Dick Butkus. In my opinion, Sid's spot is kind of, you could throw somebody else in there, which to me, I feel it could be maybe William Perry, but again, I don't know much about Sid Luckman, so I just kind of, it is what it is there. Next, the Dolphins, where we have Larry Little, Dan Marino, Jason Taylor, and Larry Csonka. I think they nailed this one. I don't know if you could take this any other direction, to be honest. That amazing Dolphins team with Marino and Larry Csonka, 17-0, so... they got to be on here. Jason Taylor, honestly, a very underrated edge rusher, just throughout NFL history, to be honest. I feel like he's not talked about enough. Larry Little, again, one of the older players. I do at least know who he is, okay? And there's going to be somebody in the comments for one of these guys that played back in the 50s where they're like, how do you not know who whatever is, all right? So I already know it's going to happen. But, yes, I may not be familiar with every single person on here. But I do feel like for the most part, as long as they're hitting the big franchise guys, which, for some of them, again, it's a little controversial. They left off Moss on one and, John Randall and whoever else I've named throughout this video. But I think for the most part, the NFL has done a very good job, actually, of honoring the franchise's top 4 players. And then for the Panthers, this is already one that I've seen. Luke Kuechly, Cam Newton, Julius Peppers, Steve Smith. This is one of those where I really don't think you can go any other direction with it. It's just those teams that are relatively new. The standout franchise guys are the standout franchise guys. There's kind of no other directions to go. Panthers are one of them. Honorable mention could be Greg Olsen, maybe Jake Delhomme. But I feel like other than that, these are the top 4 as of right now. If McCaffrey would have stayed his entire career in Carolina, he probably could have ended up being on here and maybe taking Cam's spot. But yeah, I mean, he didn't, and so this is the top 4. Next is the Eagles. So we have Steve Van Buren, Brian Dawkins, Reggie White, and Chuck Bednarik. Or Bednarik, I think I said that correctly. Anyway, yeah, Brian Dawkins, one of the best safeties of all time, if not the best, up there with Ed Reed, Ronnie Lott. Reggie White, one of the best just defensive players of all time, up there with Lawrence Taylor. And then Steve Van Buren, I don't know a ton about. I do know about Chuck Bednarik, though. Eagles are one, obviously a lot of older guys here. I think you could have probably gone other directions with this, although to be honest, I feel like the Eagles have had great players, but none that are standout franchise, NFL history level guys. So yeah, I think this is a solid top 4. Next is the Chargers. So we have LaDainian Tomlinson, Dan Fouts, Junior Seau, and Lance Allworth. This is an interesting one. So, Philip Rivers not on here. You could probably make a case for him, but Antonio Gates not being on here, am I a casual? Am I out of line for saying that? I'm actually really surprised that he's not on here, to be honest. Wow. Okay. I mean, these are all great players. I'm not really sure who you would really take away here. But 2010s football was some high level, high intensity, high caliber player era of football. I mean, the quarterback play back then was insane. The defensive play then was, that Ravens defense and the Eagles defense then. And plus you're allowed to just deck guys when they weren't even, now you have to wait for them to catch the ball and turn. You could just take people heads off basically before they even turn on for the ball then, even just 10 years ago. So I feel like Antonio Gates, he's got to have a pretty good resume to be on here, but I guess not. Okay, that's interesting. That's one that I would probably personally disagree with. But again, still a very solid top 4. Next is the Buccaneers. You have Leroy Selman, Derek Brooks, Warren Sapp, and John Lynch. Really, really good top 4. I'm honestly not sure where else they would go with this, but I will say, for what more current guy, like Mike Evans, he's going to retire being one of the best players to ever play for this franchise, especially if he never gets below 1,000 yards. At this rate, it's very, very possible. But again, I understand these are more kind of NFL legends, but I think when it's all said and done, we'll look back and think Mike Evans is one of the more underrated NFL legends, especially if he continues at this pace. I mean, he came into the league super consistent, super hard to guard, and he's really always kind of been like that. Always been a constant weapon for the Buccaneers, despite how bad their teams were over the years. So I think he could have a case to be on this. A few years from now, but as of right now, I'd say this is a very good top 4. Next is the Ravens. This one I've already seen. Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, Lamar Jackson, Jonathan Ogden. They've had an amazing franchise. Yeah, you probably could have maybe put like Flacco there with his Super Bowl. But Lamar, two-time NFL MVP, still relatively young, has a long career ahead of him. I think he's the better player than Flacco. Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Jonathan Ogden, I think, are locks. Like, you can't not put them on here. So I guess Lamar's spot was the one that was kind of like, you can maybe substitute there. I'm actually kind of interested to see what their honorable mentions were. I'm going to show that actually. Interesting. Okay, so Marshall Yanda and Jamal Lewis were their honorable mentions for this. Okay, interesting. I feel like Justin Tucker you can maybe put as honorable mention too, though. Next are the Cardinals. So we have Larry Wilson, Aeneas Williams, Larry Fitzgerald, and Dan Deerdorf. Deerdorf being one of the better tackles of all time. I feel like he isn't really talked about, honestly. Larry Fitzgerald, one of the best receivers of all time. Then, of course, Larry Williams and Aeneas Williams, I think, are both two great players as well. Cardinals, I don't think are one of the strongest franchises out there. Are there any current guys you guys think can maybe retire and end up on this at some point? Like, to me, I mean, we haven't seen Marvin Harrison Jr. yet, but, there's always a chance there. But, like, Kyler Murray, is his ceiling that high? I don't really know if it is. I love Kyler, but I'm not sure if it's really that high. So, yeah, cool, pretty cool for the Cardinals. Next is the Patriots. So we have Ty Law, Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady, and John Hanna. I'm going to be honest, I didn't see Tom Brady for a second. I thought it was like a joke. But yeah, Gronk, one of the best tight ends of all time, if not the best tight end of all time. Him and Brady both. One of the best just NFL duos of all time, to be honest. And then, of course, John Hanna, one of the best linemen of all time. Ty Law, a very underrated corner of all time. I feel like he's never brought up in, like, all-time great corner talks. But, Ty Law is, he's a Hall of Famer. He's amazing. He had an amazing career. So, yeah, Patriots, obviously, very good franchise. I feel like their honorable mentions have got to be, like, what? Drew Bledsoe is probably on there. Someone on that defense over the years has to be on there as well, other than just Ty Law. I got too curious and had to check for this one too. Andre Tippett and Richard Seymour. Okay, yeah, Seymour, I could see that. I knew there was someone on that defense that had to have been up there as like an honorable mention. And Andre Tippett too. I actually probably would not have guessed him, to be honest. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I got too curious. I just had to check. Next to the Lions, we have Bobby Lane, Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson, and Joe Schmidt. I think this is a pretty cool top four because it's guys that are like some of the most iconic, and then other people that a lot of people wouldn't know. Like, I myself am not super familiar with Joe Schmidt. I know who Bobby Lane is. But I think it's really cool for the Lions because they are starting to become this, like, much stronger franchise over the past few seasons, where it's like to think, 15 years from now, like, how much different this would look. Like, if I had to guess, so, okay, let's do this for this team. If a player on the Lions roster right now, if I had to guess one that could be on this Mount Rushmore 15, 20 years from now, whenever they retire, if I had to guess one, I would actually say Aiden Hutchinson. At the rate he's at, already in year 2, if he keeps taking those leaps and steps, I could see him being like an all-time player for the Lions. That's like a, kind of a crazy shout as of right now. As it's been 2 years, but it's cool. It's cool to think how these guys' careers will develop and see if they can end up on like one of these all-time lists. But yeah, that's pretty cool for the Lions. Next is the Broncos. We have Shannon Sharp, John Elway, Von Miller, and Terrell Davis. Very good top 4. Broncos are an amazing franchise. Ton of players to pick from. Steve Atwater, probably the biggest name not here, I guess I would say. I'm sure he's probably, I would hope, an honorable mention. Oh, actually, okay, I'm going to check. I'm starting to break down. Okay, yeah, he's on there. Yeah, and Champ Bailey, too. So, yeah, Broncos, really good franchise. It's kind of crazy those guys were honorable mentions, to be honest. I wanted to check the, like, honorable mentions once I was done and, like, already kind of had my own, like, guesses out there and then went back and checked. But, like, I'm getting too curious now. Rams, we have Jack Youngblood, Aaron Donald, Merlin Olsen, and Deacon Jones. It's crazy because I think, is this the first one we've seen where it's all defense? I'm pretty sure this might be the first one, at least the first one that I've noticed. Really shows you though just how incredible the Rams defense has been like throughout the years, especially the D line. Like, these guys are all D linemen. I think that's really, really cool. Like, they've always had a constant there. So that's really cool. I'm interested to see. I'm not gonna check for them now. I'm gonna guess. Okay, so like the Rams, I mean, you gotta have like Torrey Holt on there. You could have Marshall Faulk on there. Okay, actually, there's even more. So Orlando Pace, Marshall Faulk, and Eric Dickerson. Yeah, okay, that's all valid too. I feel like, Torrey Holt or maybe even Isaac Bruce could be honorable mentions as well. But yeah, again, those are very solid choices as well. Next to the Jaguars, we have Fred Taylor, Tony Baselli, Jimmy Smith, and Mark Brunell. Yeah, I mean, the Jaguars, they haven't been around for as long as a lot of their NFL teams, so they were like relatively new, I guess. Not sure where else you could take this. I feel like, I mean, Jalen Ramsey, is he an honorable mention? I feel like you could honestly make a case for that. Not sure really where else you would go. For a time, Alan Hearns is pretty good. Julius Thomas is pretty good, but I don't think that's like this level, but I'm not really sure who else is really there for the Jaguars. Next is Washington. So we have John Riggins, Daryl Green, Art Monk, and Sammy Baugh. That's actually a pretty cool top four. I would say this is probably pretty accurate. They've never really had a standout quarterback like a lot of these teams have on their kind of Mount Rushmores. So I guess Sammy Baugh is probably the best choice there. John Riggins, one of the best players in their franchise history. So I think the Commanders, I'm sure there's probably a lot. I'm not even super familiar with Sammy Baugh, or I know who Daryl Green is, but I don't know a ton about him. So I think those are two guys that a lot of people might not even know about. But yeah, pretty cool for the Commanders. Next is the Jets. We have Don Maynard, Joe Namath, Curtis Martin, and Darrelle Revis. Really, really good top four. It's crazy because, other than Darrelle Revis and Curtis Martin, it's been a long time since the Jets, I guess, have had someone that's really capable of, making like their, franchise Mount Rushmore. But it's pretty cool that now you know how good the Jets are. Again, like I said earlier, to think, 15, 20 years from now, if anybody on that team could end up on here. Revis, though, one of the better corners of all time. Curtis Martin, incredible running back. Joe Namath got the Jets their Super Bowl back then. Don't know a ton about Joe Maynard. Or Don Maynard. I just combine their names, I guess. Other than that, though, I feel like Kevin Mawai or Mawai, I can't remember how you say his name, would probably be an honorable mention because, like, I'm going to be honest, I know even on, like, my Madden team that I have for Ultimate Team, which I do videos on my second channel, so subscribe if you're kind of into that kind of stuff. But he's, like, one of the all-time, like best centers. So I feel like he's probably an honorable mention for this team because I'm not really sure who else you put on here for the Jets. Then next is the Cowboys. Bob Lilly, Roger Staubach, Emmitt Smith, and Randy White. Cowboys, amazing franchise. A lot of guys to choose from here. You could also probably go with Troy Aikman. You could go Jason Witten. You could probably go maybe Michael Irvin for a chance to be on here. But ultimately, yeah, this is a very solid top four. So, yeah. But again, Cowboys, one of the better franchises ever. Next, the Titans. They have Earl Campbell, Bruce Matthews, Warren Moon, and Steve McNair. This is a really cool top four because they're all Oilers players, which I think is really, really cool. No Titans guys obviously haven't been around enough to really break through and, kind of go over top, some of these really just NFL legends, to be honest. But I feel like, if anyone has a case, Derrick Henry, as far as Titans go, not Oilers players, as far as Titans go, I feel like Derrick Henry is probably the best bet there. But yeah, really cool to see like an all Oilers top four for, the Titans franchise's Mount Rushmore. Warren Moon, amazing quarterback, along with Steve McNair. Earl Campbell, one of the just kind of tank running backs. Bruce Matthews, honestly one of the best guards in NFL history. Next is the Packers. So this is again one of those franchises like the Vikings or Cowboys or Ravens where you could go maybe some different directions. But they chose Don Hudson, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Bart Starr. It is crazy the quarterbacks this team has produced over their franchise's existence, to be honest. That's insane. And maybe Jordan Love's the next Hall of Fame quarterback down the road. I don't know. But yeah, really, really cool for the Packers here. They've had some amazing players over the years, like Clay Matthews. You could probably make a case defensively to be on here. Reggie White already was for the Eagles, though he did play for the Packers, but I think he's most known for the Eagles. I don't think he made the same impact he did on Green Bay. But yeah, so I can't remember who I just said now. It already just left my mind. Oh yeah, Clay Matthews. So you could probably make a case for him being on here. Maybe somebody like Donald Driver, but I don't think he's really better than any of these quarterbacks. Same with Sterling Sharp. So yeah, insane. Packers Hall of Fame level quarterback talent throughout their entire franchise. Next is the Bengals. We have Ken Anderson, Chad Johnson, Anthony Munoz, and Ken Riley. This is the correct top four in my opinion. You could probably also make a case for like Corey Dillon. I think he's one of the more kind of unsung guys throughout the Bengals franchise. But overall, like Chad Johnson, one of the best receivers ever. That's probably a stretch, but like one of the at least better known receivers of all time. I'm not sure if all time he cracks like top 10, but again, he's definitely up there. Ken Anderson took him to, I believe, both their Super Bowls against the 49ers that they ultimately lost. Munoz, one of the best offensive linemen of all time. Ken Riley, very underrated corner of all time too. So yeah, really cool for the Bengals. Again, Corey Dillon probably has a case to be on here. And honestly, I feel like AJ Green probably has a case to be on here too. Like, I think he was pretty comparable with Chad Johnson for the Bengals, at least. Like, AJ Green, go back and check. That dude was, top of his game. He was up there in the league with Julio Jones. Probably not better than him, but like AJ Green's prime was incredibly high. And speaking of Julio Jones, the Falcons top four: Matt Ryan, Michael Vick, Deion Sanders, and Julio Jones. Definitely a top 4 for the Falcons. I don't really know where else you can honestly go with this one. Matt Ryan, probably their best quarterback in franchise history. Mike Vick, one of the most just exciting players in NFL history, just to watch. I feel like they're kind of setting up Matt Ryan for some comments using his picture from the Super Bowl, though. Then Deion, I mean, everybody knows Deion Sanders, and Julio Jones, who I just mentioned before. Again, his peak, he was the best receiver in the NFL, or at least up there, the top 3 at the time, with probably like Antonio Brown, and I mentioned AJ Green before. Des Bryant was probably up there at that point in time too. But yeah, really, really cool for the Falcons. Awesome top 4. And the final team, although don't go anywhere yet, I do want to check some of the comments and see if people have shared kind of similar things that I've said first. Raiders, though, Tim Brown, Marcus Allen, Ken Stabler, Gene Upshaw. Yes, absolutely. I think this is the Raiders' top 4, especially Tim Brown and Marcus Allen, Gene Upshaw. Ken Stabler, I do think, is probably their most prominent quarterback in their history. But again, they haven't really had amazing quarterbacks at their team's existence. So really cool top 4 for the Raiders. I really liked that the NFL compiled this. I think it's really cool to go over here, even with some players that I'm not super familiar with, just to see their impact be recognized on their team on like a Mount Rushmore type of comparison. I think it's really, really cool to show the guys some respect like that. Coming down to the comments, so let's see. Everybody just kind of praising the content. You should make a series about forming every NFL team's ultimate roster. That'd actually be pretty cool. Randy Moss being snubbed from Vikings and Patriots Rushmore is crazy. I mean, the thing is though, it's like Randy got kind of like unlucky for this, because both those teams he played for have such amazing franchises where it's like kind of hard to substitute him over like other people. You know what I mean? Like for both the Patriots and the Vikings. But it is weird not seeing him on any of those things. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, Ty Law gets the nod here for the Pats. I agree. I think that was really cool to see him there. Happy to see Cam Jordan. I agree with that too. Steve Largent retires the NFL's all-time leading receiver in yards, catches, and touchdowns, plus a whole raft of others, somewhat underplaying his achievements in this vid. I guess they didn't go over it very well, I guess, whenever they were showing it. But I honestly didn't know that. I didn't know that about Steve Largent. That's actually really cool. Criminal Randy Moss. Eli. Yeah, there you go. Eli Manning. So I do think that that's kind of interesting, and losing out to Mel Haynes certified plumbing company. Okay, but like, I don't want to disrespect, the older guys that played, because, they're legends for a reason. But when you play against the competition Eli did, it's like, I feel like you got to honor that somehow, especially beating Brady in Super Bowl. That's not an easy feat. But I guess they just chose to go elsewhere and honor some of the older guys instead of him. So, yeah. But yeah, I can definitely see the complaint there. Wouldn't have put Roethlisberger over Franco Harris. So yeah, Harris is someone that I named. Steelers almost need 2 Mount Rushmores, one for offense and one for defense. They have an amazing franchise. I can see that. There's definitely some guys I was surprised kind of were left off of there. I remember naming. But yeah, Franco Harris is definitely one of them. Really, Frank Gore over Roger Craig. I'm a Rams fan. I put Craig over Gore. Okay, Carolina's is pretty much exactly right, but I'd have to add Jake Delhomme as an honorable mention. Yeah, I did mention that. I feel like there's not really a ton of guys to really throw in after that. I think Jonathan Stewart and Ryan Khalil, Jordan Gross could have been honorable mentions, but that's splitting hairs. Yeah, again, I feel like they nailed it. The Panthers, their best guys of all time are, I think, kind of like, far and away their best guys of all time. There's a bit of a drop-off after that. Other than Greg Olsen, there's a bit of a drop-off after that as well. So, okay, yeah, that's going to be it for the comments. So, yeah, we're going to end off on that note, I guess. It's so stupid. If you guys did enjoy, though, be sure to subscribe to the channel down below. It's always NFL content on this channel, reacting to stuff like this. I do NFL quizzes, although we haven't done that in a while. I'm going to do that again. If you guys want to see that, let me know down below. I'm probably going to do it anyway, though, to be honest with you. We're doing team predictions for next season. We rank players, teams, all that kind of good stuff. On the road to 1,000 subscribers. So thank you guys for watching. I do really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.